More than 20 million Americans suffer from asthma. And according to a new report from Climate Central, people living in Detroit are among those suffering the most. Joining me now is Shel Winkley, a climate engagement specialist from Climate Central. Shel, thanks for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Thanks for having us and let us talk a little bit about the allergy season.
Yeah, so it's an important time of year. I mean, it started, a couple months ago, and people are dealing with this going forward. But what is it about Detroit that has more people here suffering?
So you have Detroit, and really it's not specialized to you there in Michigan. It's a lot of us across the country. But what we're finding is that our pollen season is lengthening. In Detroit specifically, we're finding what we call freeze-free days. We've seen an increase of about 29 of those over the last 50 years. So what that means is we used to have about 165 days where we went freeze-free there in Detroit. Now with man-made climate change, we've added to that. Now we've seen an increase of almost 30 days, which means you're running a stretch of about 195 days without a freeze, which lets the plants do their thing, which means pollen is with us. So it's with us sooner and it is with us longer.
So let's talk about the city itself. Does the Detroit area compare to the rest of the state? I mean, you would think urban, there aren't as many plants, not as much pollen flying around, but people are still clearly having an issue.
Right. Pollen's going to impact you no matter what because those plants are blooming, even if you maybe have taken them out because of urban development, which is a cause amongst itself that's adding to the warmth of the atmosphere, but that pollen is still there. What we know also with urban heating and urban development is that it does take away that vegetation. So when you think about allergies, you think about things that come from plants, but we also have to talk about ozone days that the air pollution is higher, and without vegetation, without the trees, and with more cars and exhaust that we have from air conditioning and just travel in general, we're seeing more impacts of that as well, which really lead to those health impacts as well.
So what kind of irritants are we talking about? In addition to the pollen that we're talking about from plants, we also have pollution, and sometimes, as we saw a lot last year, wildfire smoke all the way from Canada.
Correct. So let's start with the pollution aspect. First of all of this is because of extra CO2 in our atmosphere. So we're talking about the things that we have done as humans. We've been burning natural gas, mainly methane, oil, and coal, and that's adding that CO2. So on a summer day when it's hot and there's not a lot of air, the air is just stagnant. That's what causes those higher ozone days where you can have those air quality alerts. We also have a climate impact. Last year, we saw all of the wildfire smoke that came from the western side of Canada. We have a tool that's called the Climate Shift Index where we can take temperatures that are happening, which at that time of the year, they were well above average for Western Canada. And we can put attribution science in it to understand what kind of human-induced changes we saw. And it was high there. And we saw the fires. And then the jet stream carried that smoke. So while temperatures may have been decently normal for a summertime in Detroit, you had the jet stream carrying a very, very big climate impact event and impacting you locally, which brought down the air quality. For some of us, it caused big health concerns there as well.
Yeah, so you mentioned the season's getting a little longer. Can you give us some perspective on what it used to be like and what it is now?
Sure. So let's talk about spring first, right? We just came through spring. We put out a retrospective looking back, and we saw that for Detroit specifically, there were 16 days that had a fingerprint of climate change to bring warmer than average temperatures. And that started as early as the beginning of spring. Now let's talk about summer. Let's look forward to the summer heat. We all know that it can be hot in summer, but temperatures are getting hotter. In fact, this is a trend of what we call excessive heat days. So days above 85 degrees in Detroit. You can see the trend over the past 50 years. We've added about 10 of those days. Heat in the afternoon, along with humidity, gets a lot of attention in summertime because we walk in it, we live in it, kids play in it, we understand that heat. Nighttime heat is also very important. In fact, in this warmer world that we live in, that CO2 blanket that is covering the earth, kind of like a wool blanket, it's also holding in that nighttime warmth. So when you look at Detroit for nighttime temperatures, and we're talking about the average low through the months of June, July, and August, we've seen that temperature increase as well. In fact, we've seen it move from 59 degrees to about 65 degrees. So over the past 50 years, that average low temperature in Detroit has warmed about 5.7 degrees there in the city.
Okay, so then it begs the question, what can we do about it, both on an individual basis and from a larger perspective?
Okay, so the very simple answer to that is we have to stop polluting our atmosphere. We have to stop burning the carbon pollution that is creating this blanket and holding in our warmth. But in our cities, we can also make some changes, right? We can take away some of the concrete that we've added, add back some of that vegetation, and especially the native plants. That's really important when it comes down to this factor. So what that can do is, in a very urban development where you got a lot of concrete and buildings and air conditioners blowing to keep us cool from this heat, you can see a rise in temperatures there as much as 8 to 11 degrees above what a more vegetative area may be around city parks or where lawns are a little more prevalent. So we can add more vegetation in there. But we can also just have our conversations with our communities, see what we can do on a local scale. And as this heat comes through, we talked about that nighttime warmth, the daytime warmth. Not everybody has the luxury of cooling themselves in their homes. So let's also help identify where those cooling centers are. And let's also make sure that we have the volunteer power or the staffing power so that those cooling centers can stay open during the overnight hours and on the weekends when folks need it most. Because again, this heat isn't just impacting us during the daytime hours.
All right, very important information. Shel Winkley from Climate Central, thanks so much for joining us tonight.
Absolutely appreciate you. Thank you.